Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Prosecutors Alliance Survivor Center training series. We have quite a few people joining, so we're just going to give it a couple of minutes to let everybody come in. Thank you so much for being here today. People are coming in quickly. Welcome, everyone. If you just joined us, we're just giving it a couple of minutes for everyone to come into the webinar. Okay, looks like it's slowing down. Okay. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. People are still kind of trickling in. My name is Dr. Gina Castro Rodriguez. I'm the director of the Survivor Center at the Prosecutors Alliance of California. Today, our training is on trauma recovery centers and survivors. We're just going to give it another minute or so for people to come in, and then we'll be back on. I'm going to go off camera for 1 minute. We'll be back on in just a moment. All right, welcome everyone. Looks like we've got quite a few people now. We're at a little over 100. So welcome to our training today. I'm Dr. Gina Castro Rodriguez. I'm with the Prosecutors Alliance. I run the Prosecutors Alliance Survivor Center. And today we're going to be talking about the trauma recovery centers with Dr. Sarah Metz from the University of California, San Francisco. And before we get started, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping things. First, if you have questions, if you would please put those questions in the Q&A. I'm going to be helping Dr. Metz today, and so I will periodically tell her when there's questions there and read them out loud so we can answer them. And if you want to give a shout out from where you're calling in from today, would you please put that in the chat? So let us know what town or city or country you're coming from today in the chat, please. Also, a question that everyone will ask, so I'll answer now. Yes, you will get a copy of the PowerPoint. I usually send those out on Friday. Please make sure you do the evaluation that's going to get emailed to you. That's really helpful for us. And then you will get the PowerPoint if you were registered in here today on Friday. Let's see who's in the house. We have Los Angeles, Bishop, Mill Valley, LA, San Diego, more LA, California, Santa Clarita, San Francisco DA's office. Nice, welcome. Sacramento, San Jose, Vista, Carson, Michigan, Oakland, Youth Alive. Nice to see you. Lancaster, Atlanta, Madera. Let's see more. Los Angeles, Sacramento, Lincoln, Nebraska, Los Angeles, Oakland, San Diego, more Sacramento, Alameda. Nice. Central Valley, Clear Lake. Oh, welcome, Clear Lake. And San Rafael, Yolo. Wow, we've got people from all over. Contra Costa, San Benito, Aliso Viejo. Nice. Orange County, El Centro. Oh, we've got people from all over, Sarah. Antioch. Awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. That helps us get to know where people are coming from today. And then before we get started, we're going to ask you one more question. So using the Mentimeter, you can use your phone or your computer and go to www.menti.com and use the code that's here, 59102485, to answer the questions that we're going to have for you today. We've got 3 of these slides where we're going to ask for some audience participation. So the first one is, what is your professional role? We want to know who is in the house. Are you an attorney? Are you a victim advocate? Are you a mental health professional, a student? If you would go to menti.com and put your code in and then start answering, you can see that people are starting to answer. We've got victim advocates, district attorneys, victim witness, legal advocate. Nice. Case managers, victim compensation, welcome. Nice. Victim advocate, the larger the word is, the more people that are putting in the same response. So we've got lots of victim advocates, mental health therapists. Excellent. Peer support, welcome. Clinical psychologist, therapist, intern, welcome. We'd love to have students and interns and trainees here. Awesome. HT task force director, welcome. Oh. Lots of great people today. We're at about 134 participants right now. School administration, great. Family Justice Center. Well, all right. We've got a full house. Housing advocates, awesome. Case navigators. Look at all these people working out in the field helping survivors. It's amazing. All right. Thank you all for adding your professional roles here. That also gives Sarah and I an idea of who's here, helps us tailor the information a little bit. And we'll have a couple more for these as we go, just so we get some information back from you and try to make this as interactive as we can on Zoom. So just a reminder, questions go in the Q&A. If you put them in there, I'll keep track of them. I'll read them to Dr. Metz, and then we'll be able to answer them. If it's something I can answer quickly, I will just respond in the chat. But if it's for Dr. Metz, I'll just read that out loud to her occasionally when we take some pauses. Okay. All right. Just scanning through victim services coordinator, manager, prosecutors, school admin, victim advocates. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm going to go ahead and stop share and introduce Dr. Metz. This is Dr. Sarah Metz. She is the director of the Trauma Services Division. Did I get that right? Close? Was I close?
Very, very close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You do it. I knew I was going to mess it up.
No, it's totally okay. And I'm so excited to be here. What an amazing group. I'm also really excited just to, I guess, figuratively, I guess on webinars, I don't get to hear your voice, but just, yeah, to hear from you guys and your experiences, and we'll get to it in a little bit, but, you know, just kind of your experience, if you have, with trauma recovery centers. I think I saw somebody from a Los Angeles-based TRC on here, so also others, please, you know, offer any reflections and contributions as we go. But I am Sarah Metz. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I'm the director for the Division of Trauma Recovery Services here at UCSF. We'll get into kind of all the programs that we have in the division, just in case any of you are local, or if you have clients that are local to San Francisco that you think could benefit from some of our other services. And I'm also the chief psychologist here at San Francisco General Hospital, so I have a few hats, but I'm super duper excited. This is my favorite thing to do, which is to talk about the trauma recovery services and what we provide to survivors of interpersonal violence. So yes, as Dr. Castro Rodriguez said, at any point, please put questions into the Q&A. As she said, you'll be getting the slides, so you know, you can read the slides for content, but if you do have a question, would love to hear that from you. So I You know what, Gina, do you want to maybe start with the next question that you have on Menti?
Sure. Give me 1 second. Okay. So our next question is, what do you know or have heard about the trauma recovery centers? So no wrong answers here. Just one sentence. You know, you've made a referral, you've been there before, you've heard about it from a friend. The code for this one is right up at top, 5910-2485. And you go to menti.com to do that. Got a couple of answers. Oh, maybe I can't see the answers live. Here we go. One-stop shop, not acquainted, community-based. I've heard about them, but I don't know a lot. Great, you're going to learn a lot today. Referral, nothing, not much. I actually like the not muches, Sarah. That means we're going to have a lot to talk about today. Heard about them, hoping to become more familiar. Let's see, not too much. Housing, not enough. First time, 0. Work at one, yay. Had referrals from them before, here to learn. Great. Well, it's wonderful to know that many of you came to learn today and get some new information about trauma recovery centers. We have a pretty comprehensive presentation that's going to tell you all about the model and the work being done. All right.
Yes, thank you so much. And so for my fellow TRC community members, please pop in, you know, in the chat with yeah, just anything that you want to add. I want to, you know, part of what we're going to talk about today. Well, here, let me just start my presentation. Sorry, guys, give me a second. I'm trying to manage 2 screens here. All right, are you seeing the presentation?
No, you've got one of your Google windows open. Oh.
Awesome. Hopefully it was really inappropriate. No.
It was not bad at all. Oh, there we go. We've got it.
Okay. I don't know why this is there.
We don't either. It's small though.
Hold on. I don't know why it was showing that. Sorry, guys. We did practice. I
Yeah,
don't
we
know
did
why
practice
this is
and that was not there.
going here. Can you go away? This is annoying, guys. Let's see. Hold on. Ah, okay.
Awesome.
Now it's full screen.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. So I will kind of ground us in a minute to my thinking in terms of the ordering of events with the information that we'll go over today. But always like to kind of start the grounding in our vision, which is a community that heals the wounds of violence and embraces hope for a nonviolent, compassionate world. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we'll do a brief overview of our entire division of services here at UCSF, again, just in case there's a lot of providers on the line, including victim advocates and case managers and stuff. So just want to let you know what else we have available here in case it's of use. And then I'll go over our specific clinic here at UCSF. I always go back and forth which content to present first, but I think giving you a real life example of what a TRC looks like and then going into kind of the components of it, breaking it out, you at least have a little context to visualize what the components can look like. And this is really where, for other TRCs that are on the line, might be able to offer kind of different adaptations that they've made in their clinics, but still meet kind of the components of a trauma recovery center. So really excited for that part. We'll talk a little bit about our history, so kind of how we came to be. We'll talk about the replication. We'll drill deeper into the core components of a trauma recovery center, and then I'll show you a little bit about our specific data here at San Francisco. Okay, and so our overall division heals survivors of interpersonal violence across the lifespan. So there's a number of programs within our division. We have CASARC, which is Child and Adolescent Support, Advocacy, and Resource Center. And in this program, we treat children that have experienced sexual abuse. We can also treat children that have witnessed significant violence. Our team is small but mighty, but because we are a small team, we do unfortunately have to triage cases. And so we do tend to see mainly children that have experienced sexual abuse. We are a multidisciplinary team of mental health clinicians, both psychologists and master's level clinicians. And then we have a forensic medical team that consists of physician's assistants and nurse practitioners that provide the forensic evidence collection for children that report acute sexual abuse. And then our forensic team, so CASARC is also San Francisco's Children's Advocacy Center. So the coordinator for the CRC is also housed at CASARC and helps to coordinate what are called multidisciplinary interviews for children, again, that have reported sexual abuse. And those are coordinated with the DA's office, with the Special Victims Unit, with CPS, Victim Services. It's a multidisciplinary, as in the name, approach to interviewing that works to minimize the amount of time that children need to be interviewed, ideally only once. So that's CASARC. And then within the division, we also have neuropsychology. They conduct the inpatient and outpatient neuropsychological assessments for San Francisco General Hospital. They also do consult services for inpatient units. We work really closely with them here at the TRC. We have a program called the Neurotrauma Outreach Program, which I will get to in a minute. And so our UCSF TRC has multiple kind of patient populations that we serve. So we also house the Rape Treatment Center. So in San Francisco General Hospital is the only hospital in the city where survivors of sexual assault can go for forensic evidence collection. And it's the Rape Treatment Center forensic medical providers that do that service. Our CASARC medical providers and Rape Treatment Center medical providers kind of cross cover, so they can all see anyone across the lifespan that comes into the emergency department or in the hospital. We have NTOP, which is the Neurotrauma Outreach Program. And through that program, we serve survivors that have an acquired traumatic brain injury. They either, most of them actually acquired that TBI in the context of a crime, but there is a portion of clients that have a TBI just from day-to-day life. So an example, they got drunk, they rode their bike, they fell off, they hit their head, they ended up at San Francisco General Hospital. The one piece to gain access to NTOP for us as not as a victim of crime is they have to have been touched somehow by neurosurgery over at San Francisco General. And then our TRC here also has what we call our bridge position. So this is a dedicated position to work with the Wraparound Project over at San Francisco General Hospital, and they are a hospital-based violence intervention program. And through that program, they serve survivors of targeted community violence, some of which is gang involved or gang affiliated, but not always. And so we have a TRC clinician that's dedicated to the Wraparound Project, and we do a lot of care coordination, and they are on site a couple days a week over at Wraparound. And then we also have Survivors International. And through that program, we treat asylees, asylum seekers, and refugees that experience persecution in their home country. So we see a wide array of clients from all over the world that speak all kinds of languages. And just to kind of preempt, we have a fair number of bilingual or multilingual clinicians here. If we don't have in-house languaging capacity, we have a contract with a clinic over at San Francisco General Hospital that we train to provide in-person interpretation for our clients. And then if that group doesn't have the languaging capacity, then we do have what's called the language line to fill in the gaps, which of course isn't as ideal, but we really, try to meet all languaging needs. Okay, so what do we treat? Who do we treat? And what do we do? So as any clinic, we do have eligibility criteria. So for our trauma recovery center, and this is not necessarily true of all trauma recovery centers, but here we treat clients that are 18 years and older. They have to be a San Francisco resident, and the crime usually has to have occurred within the last 3 years, with the clarification that this doesn't include derivative victims of homicide. For those survivors, there's no time limit on when they can seek services with us. And then also there can't be a duplication of services. So kind of how the threshold that we use is that they can't be working with another master's level clinician or higher level outside of TRC. And really that's just trying to kind of balance like resource access, knowing that we do have limited resources here.
Sarah, we have a question. Do you provide
Wonderful.
services to and have expertise in working with survivors of human trafficking?
We do. That absolutely is an eligible crime experience. I will say that we don't serve many, only because we tend to find a little bit more apprehension for them to seek services, but absolutely, that is absolutely an eligible community.
Okay. And then one more question. How do you define derivative or ancillary victims?
Good question. So a derivative victim is a family member, and the Victim Compensation Board has a definition of family member. I believe it's, a blood relative. They were living with the person who was killed at the time, or they had like a caretaking relationship with them. So we use that criteria as well. Of note, derivative victims also include folks that have been killed at the hands of police. For folks that have experience with the Victim Compensation Board, you might know that specific experience is often not covered by VCB benefits. There has to be first a full-on investigation with the police department, conducted by the police department that shows excessive use of force, for example. But TRCs, because we have the grant, we are able to serve those survivors. But where we bump up against some trickiness is that while we might be able to provide the mental health services to them, they might not yet be eligible for the VCB entitlements until that investigation can happen. And for clients coming in, our services are completely free of charge. This includes the services that they receive over at San Francisco General Hospital. So the forensic evidence collection is no cost, and any of the other services that I'll get into in a second that we provide there are also free of cost. And then immigration or insurance status is not a barrier. We see everybody.
You've got one more question. Why is the time limit after the crime 3 years for service?
That's a great question. We just have limited capacity. And so we have to have a cutoff somewhere, and sometimes that actually moves based on our wait list. So sometimes, unfortunately, we do have to be a little bit more restricted with that. But we always, will hear out, exception cases if something does fall outside of our timeline. Yeah. Thank you for the questions, guys. All right, so what do? We do emergency room advocacy and support. So during business hours, if an acute sexual assault survivor arrives to San Francisco General Hospital, we have a multidisciplinary response of a TRC mental health clinician, as well as one of our forensic medical providers. During that time, we're providing psychological first aid, any emergency case management that the survivor might need. Any client that does go to the emergency department for, reporting a sexual assault, they are scheduled a follow-up appointment here at the Trauma Recovery Center. We're about a 15-20-minute walk from the hospital, so we are not on hospital grounds. But we offer this appointment to any sexual assault survivor. They, of course, don't have to come, but we want them to know that they have this space available to them, even if 5 minutes before the appointment, they decide that they want to reach out. We are providing hybrid services, so we do both in-person as well as Zoom. We do a very comprehensive psychosocial diagnostic intake evaluation with all of our clients. We provide really comprehensive clinical case management. Honestly, whatever the client needs, we attempt to do to the best of our ability. We provide trauma-informed, evidence-based, evidence-informed psychotherapy. We offer groups. We offer limited family work, and we also offer psychiatric medication evaluation and management. So we currently have 2 psychiatrists on staff, one of which is bilingual in Spanish as well. So we are a short-term treatment model. So we start with a frame of 16 sessions, but if a client is engaged and it's clinically indicated, we do have a formal process for extending that case. And the formal process really helps us to ensure that there's objectivity in making those decisions, that there's consistency between clients, and that we're using that, but also balancing patient flow. So sessions to have a treatment plan extended from session 16 to 32. That approval level happens at the clinical supervisor level, and then anything 32 sessions and beyond, that gets bumped up to our leadership committee, our steering committee level.
There's a question, Sarah. If a traffic survivor walked into the hospital seeking help but does not want police involvement, would you be able to help them?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about that, but yes, for sure.
Thank you.
So our main treatment components that we provide is psychoeducation. We do a lot of psychoeducation with our clients. It's actually quite striking how validating it is for clients to learn about trauma, the impact of trauma, whether it's acute stress disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, not using any of that language at all, but just normalizing for them the experiences that they're having after trauma. Oftentimes survivors, they feel like they're going crazy. Some of the symptoms really can feel like psychosis. They're hearing voices, they're seeing shadows, they're just really anxious and not sure kind of why these things are happening. So being able to put kind of names to what they're experiencing and normalizing that just has a huge impact. We also do an enormous amount of skills building with our clients. So our treatment frame, in addition to it being short-term, and one of the reasons why it's short-term is we really focus on the stage 1 in terms of like Judith Herman's 3 stages of trauma recovery. And that first stage is safety and stabilization. So our goal is really to help the client cope with the immediate impact of the trauma, but we absolutely will move into that stage 2 of trauma processing with the client if they're ready for it, and they're engaged with us. And our goals are really to integrate the trauma into the person's life, to help them return to their pre-trauma level of functioning, and ideally even better when they leave.
There's a question in the Q&A. It says, do clients need to give consent for the evaluation?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have 2 separate formal consents. We have an intake, an intake consent, and then once they are assigned a clinician during that first appointment with the clinician, they sign a treatment consent. So this is just a list of some of the common evidence-based treatments that we use with our clients. So prolonged exposure, cognitive processing, narrative exposure, STARE. We just recently had the entire clinic trained in EMDR, which is really cool. Just basic CBT. And then our clinic is also, we're harm reduction based. So by no means do we turn clients away if they show up intoxicated. We don't expect them to be clean and sober. when they engage in services with us, but we do employee harm reduction. So we certainly, again, from that safety and stabilization perspective, from a risk of re-victimization perspective, we really want to help the client to, engage in substance use as safely as possible and in a way that will allow them to get the most possible benefit from treatment. So that might mean, that we ask if it's accessible for them to maybe not use, on the day of their appointment before coming into their session. If that's not accessible, we might ask them to reduce the amount that they're using before they're coming in for a session. We educate them kind of on the role of substances and avoidance and maintaining PTSD, especially also in the context of these trauma processing treatments, and doing outside session, homework or practice exercises. So just providing a lot of psychoeducation to them about, maybe when to use, in relation to session and outside session practice to really get the most from the treatment. Okay, and then another piece that we offer here at UCSF TRC is it's called our chat program, or Communities Healing and Transforming Trauma. And so this is our Speakers Bureau. And this really was a grassroots effort from our clients some years ago. So I would say, probably about 15 years ago at this point, maybe a little less. There were multiple years where the TRC's budget was put on the chopping block. And the survivors that we were treating, were like, no. Who do we have to talk to make sure that your doors don't close? And so at their behest, they wanted to come down to Sacramento and they wanted to share about their experience with the TRC, and why they needed the services. And what they reflected after that experience was just how powerful it was for them to use their experience, their survivor experience to really inform, the government, but also inform about the impact that the crime has had on their life and their needs as survivors. And so from that, we created a whole approach to our Speakers Bureau, and there actually is some literature out there on this. And so it has multiple goals for both the trauma survivor as well as the community that is, engaging with the chat speaker. So, a huge thing, as I mentioned, for the survivors is that there's healing in being in community, right? They get the sense of belonging. The public speaking for many is also an outlet or an avenue for healing. And we help structure their experience and support their experience in a really trauma-informed way to ensure that it remains, hopefully a healing experience for them. And then for audiences, it really challenges the stigma and the shame around being a survivor. And then there's also, as I said earlier, advocacy as healing. So for the survivors, having great value of testimony, and for many, really having that as part of their post-traumatic growth experience. And then for audiences, it has the benefit of them learning about what services are available for crime survivors, and also raising awareness around the impact of violence. So the key components for our chat program are restoring the trauma, containment strategies, so helping and coaching survivors, what do they need to do before a speaking engagement, what might they need during a speaking engagement, what might they need after a speaking engagement, community building, and then restoring agency and a sense of competency. Okay.
We've got a
And then
question, Sarah. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Does every county have a trauma recovery center? And then how can your therapeutic insights help guide district attorneys as they interact with rape survivors during prosecutions?
Oh my goodness. Okay. I will, if I'm going to put on hold your question about where TRCs are located in California. I have a whole map in a little bit that will show you where we live. And then an amazing, amazing question, and I so appreciate your question around, how to help district attorneys support survivors. This is actually a huge area of interest at the state level. I mean, I think for all of us, survivor advocates, because unfortunately, the majority of the time, the criminal justice system is re-traumatizing, if not more traumatizing, for survivors. And so, that is something, for example, that TRCs, we can provide trainings on. That's a component of what we do to help build capacity in community. And so I would, I'll have my contact information at the end of this presentation. And then, we now have Zoom, of course, but if there is a local TRC close to you, we could also do a connection that way. So thank you for that question. I think it's a much needed area in criminal justice, which is like doing some trauma-informed training and honestly, criminal justice reform, in terms of supporting those cases through the system. And then again, I wanted to sneak this in here in case there are folks local to San Francisco. You know that this is here. So the Rape Treatment Center, we provide sensitive, respectful, comprehensive medical care to clients of acute sexual assault. Acute is typically defined as 120 days, so 5 days. So for forensic evidence collection, the first 5 days after the assault is thought to be kind of when the most they can kind of pull, the perishable evidence the best during that period. RTC provides medical and psychological aftercare. So again, they do that multidisciplinary response in the emergency department, and then also that follow-up appointment is multidisciplinary with a TRC mental health clinician and a medical provider. So if the survivor was prescribed any medications in the emergency department, they're having, side effects, or they're just having, medically related questions or new symptoms that have popped up since the assault, the medical providers, there in live time for them to ask. And then again, we do the forensic evidence collection for prosecution if the client desires that. We also provide STI, HIV, and pregnancy prophylaxis. Again, this is all free of charge for survivors. And to answer the question from earlier, survivors can have forensic evidence collected with or without police involvement. So we can't do like Jane Doe or John Doe kits. So the client's name is associated with the kit. That's part of the consent process for survivors when they're in the emergency department is, once the evidence is handed over to law enforcement, it's law enforcement property. And also our medical providers are, oh my gosh, I just lost the word. They're mandated reporters. And so they have to report to the police that a crime occurred, where the crime occurred. Here in San Francisco, though, we have a really good relationship with SFPD. And so if a survivor says, I want forensic evidence collection, but I do not want the police to reach out to me, they won't. What happens is that if, for example, there's a hit in CODIS with the DNA that's collected, the police will call the TRC and will ask if one of our clinicians can do outreach to the client. And so if we do have permission from the client for TRC to do outreach, then we can, kind of approach the client and let them know that there is new information on their case, and would they like to be connected to the police, or is that, a liaison support that the TRC can provide for them? So we really try to put it, in the survivor's court.
We've got another question, Sarah. It says, what sensitivity training do you recommend for prosecutors to enhance empathy and patience?
Whew. I love these questions. I love how you're thinking. I can't say like, oh, there's this particular training that's out there. I honestly don't know if others know of any, or have any to recommend. Like, definitely please put those out there. But honestly, I think TRCs, that's really our bread and butter is, helping to educate about, crime, violence impact, and what that looks like for survivors, how that can play out when relating or interacting with survivors, ways, so, this is coming, I'm assuming, from a DA. So ways, for example, that a DA in your role can approach the survivor from a trauma-informed perspective. That is absolutely a training, for example, that the TRC can provide and can tailor, to your specific needs. But if others are aware of any like online trainings or others, like definitely please put that out there.
Yeah, I'll make a plug for two. Prosecutors Alliance Survivor Center has a training on effective communication with sexual assault survivors, where we go over the experience of a sexual assault survivor, and then we go into some interview and communication techniques, including language to use with survivors. And then Equitas is an organization that works with prosecutors and has lots of great trainings about working with survivors of interpersonal violence. And I'll put Equitas in the chat.
Wonderful, thank you. We did that training together once, Dr. Castro Rodriguez. That was fun.
We did do it together. We could do it again.
Hey, all right. So, I think it's always nice just to kind of hear the narrative about kind of where we started and to where we are now. So back in 1997, our chief of surgery here at San Francisco General, Dr. Bill Schechter, was talking with Alicia Basilari, who is the founder of Trauma Recovery Centers. And he said, we can sew them up, but we can't make them well. So really highlighting, that as a trauma, level 1 trauma hospital, we can repair a lot of physical wounds, but typically that's where the care stops. That they recognize that's just the physical, that's not helping to heal the overall human, that was impacted. And so that's really all our small but mighty and fierce leader needed to hear. She really set on her way to put together a model of care that provided, the much needed services and support for survivors, with a huge goal of reducing barriers to accessing care and providing high quality, cost effective care. So the TRC model was built on a foundation of evidence. They did really kind of like a initial market research, essentially, right? Like what currently exists, what doesn't exist, where are the gaps, what gaps need to be filled. So we collected data on the barriers to care for survivors of violence, identified gaps in funding and services for underserved survivors of violence. So we kind of learned, for example, that there was a lot of money funneled specifically for intimate partner violence, which is amazing, but then there's this, umpteen long list, of other types of crime survivors that are out there without access to services. And so from that, initial field research, they put together a pilot project. And in this pilot project, we assessed the feasibility of basically our model. So assertive outreach, clinical case management, trauma-based mental health services, and multidisciplinary care coordination. So that includes, psychiatric, medical, and social services. So they were super fortunate. They got, in 2001, with support from Senator John Burton, a bill was passed that provided UCSF with 4 years of funding to create a demonstration project, and that bill required us to conduct a randomized clinical trial. In that, 2/3 of clients were randomized to get the TRC services, and 1/3 was randomized to get treatment as usual, which at the time was community mental health or local victim services office to apply for victim restitution funds. So typically what they found, right, is a client would go to victim services, for example, they'll get help, with the application, and then they'd be referred to an individual therapist, in the community. So our goals of the RCT were to identify and remove barriers to care, improve clinical outcomes, reach survivors from underserved communities, increase access to VCB entitlements, and improve clinical and cost effectiveness of treatment. And I want to just kind of go back to number 2, the improving clinical outcomes. They wanted to know that people were getting better, not just that they felt good, while in treatment with us. Like they wanted to know that these folks, that the symptoms they're experiencing, the distress they're experiencing, the impact on their quality of life, on their day-to-day functioning, that those things were improving. So that was very much a huge goal, even in thinking, what we would do when we had a survivor in front of us. So our outcomes from that, So we saw a significant increase in the use of mental health services. So treatment as usual is the teal color versus TRC. 77% of folks made use of mental health services. Now, this is a unique slide that I like to include. So this data, this was not a goal by any stretch of the imagination of the randomized clinical trial, but just looking at the data that they collected, they learned that there was a pretty significant increase in survivors' engagement with law enforcement. So again, the blue is treatment as usual. So 71% of folks engaged with TRC filed a police report, and 96% agreed to forensic evidence collection. So when we think about reducing revictimization, preventing a perpetrator, from perpetrating again, having that forensic evidence collection is a huge part, right, of public safety from that perspective. And again, our clients can get that forensic evidence collected without police involvement. So, for the DAs out there, having a survivor, and knowing that there's a match, but maybe they don't want to participate, I appreciate the complexities of that, but nonetheless, it is data and information. And then in terms of the VCB applications, again, a huge increase in applications being filed for folks that engaged with TRC. And again, for anybody that's attempted to fill out a VCB application, attempted to track a VCB application, attempting to go through the appeals process with Cal VCB, it's insane, even for our master's level and doctoral level clinicians, right? So, and we're not in the face of acute trauma at the time, right? And it's still a hot mess to navigate. And so, expecting that an acute survivor attempting to manage what just happened, attempting, to still care for their family, attempting to still make it to work, attempting to still make it to school, and, do all of this administrative, complicated steps, to access, entitlements that they're entitled to. It's really a daunting process. And so something we really want to help, facilitate for survivors.
We have a question,
So,
Sarah. It
yeah.
says, if I understand the stat correctly, it shows that support of TRC is beyond beneficial to their cooperation with law enforcement. Is that an accurate statement?
What we found, and again, this wasn't like a hypothesis that we held before the randomized clinical trial or even an outcome we were seeking, but what we found was that, kind of like this unintended outcome of clients engaging with the TRC is that it did increase their participation with law enforcement.
You've got one more. It's a couple more, actually. It
Yeah.
says, if we get a CODIS hit, we must interview all witnesses to assess the truth. So are we creating conflict when we agree not to report?
Can you say that one more time? So if we get a CODIS hit and
If
you
we
have
get a
to
CODIS hit, we
interview,
must interview all witnesses to assess the truth. So are we creating conflict when we agree not to report? So the CODIS hit would come after. I mean, the agreement not to report comes at the beginning, correct?
yeah. So part of our consent process to getting our RTC, I know RCT, RCT, to getting rape treatment center services is part of that consent is letting the survivor know that we're mandated reporters, letting them know that the evidence that's collected becomes the property of police. And part of this, so when you're kind of thinking about being trauma informed, right? Again, you have an acute sexual assault survivor in the emergency department within 5 days of having been assaulted, right? They probably don't know their left from their right at that point. Like the world is just not making sense. And so I think to even expect a survivor to fully appreciate the implications of reporting to the police is a lot to ask. And so from a trauma-informed perspective, it really is offering the survivor the option so that they can go ahead because the evidence is perishable. So unfortunately, it's get it or lose it. So they can get it. It can be stored. It can be, all kits get processed. So it's processed, the results, now the police have the results, versus a survivor decides 6 months later, okay, I think I'm ready now to make the report to the police, but they didn't get the evidence collected, and they, that reduces the strength of their case.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if there is a CODIS hit, in San Francisco, the Special Victims Unit will reach out to Trauma Recovery Center and say, we have a hit. Can you please contact the survivor and see if they're interested in participating now? Correct?
Yes. Yep.
Great.
And so, part of what, happens is, one of our clinicians, if TRC has permission to outreach, we will outreach to the client and just say, there's new information about your case, would you like to connect to learn more?
Yeah, I think this is a really important difference when using a trauma-informed lens, is to say that, agency and control has been taken away from a survivor who's been assaulted, and that this gives them some agency back and also some time to make decisions. And like you said, not in the moment surrounding the trauma.
Yeah.
Got a couple more questions. Do TRCs submit VCB applications? So does TRC submit Cal VCB or victims compensation applications with local claims or through Sacramento main office?
Great question. And I venture to guess each TRC might be different in their answer. Here in San Francisco, we have an assigned liaison at our local victim service office that helps. Sometimes, and in consultation with our liaison, we might apply directly to Sacramento, but 9 times out of 10, we go through our liaison.
And then another question, where does the 10% interest on Cal VCB claims go? To the victim or organizational overhead?
A lovely question that I cannot ask, but I appreciate the intention of wanting to know where their money goes. I don't know the answer. Yeah.
Okay, our next question is, how do you navigate jeopardy with clients whose perpetrators have been accused in the past?
How do we navigate double jeopardy?
It just says, how do you navigate jeopardy with clients whose perpetrators have been accused in the past?
I'm wondering if the question is around like the legal double jeopardy definition, and that would be outside my scope.
No, I'm not sure what the question is either. If you want to clarify, I can ask again. So we, just to kind of summarize, with our randomized clinical trial, we found our model of care increases access to trauma-based mental health services. Crime survivors are more likely to return to work. The range of survivors that victims of crime received was significantly higher versus the fee-for-service model, as well as a significant increase in applying for victim compensation benefits. And we also found that it reduces homelessness, and we were cheaper than fee-for-service model. Okay, clarification on that question was, yes, they were asking about double jeopardy.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's really outside my scope. So I think that would be a question for an attorney.
Thank you.
All right, so to jump in here to our replication and technical assistance. So between 2004 and 2014, Dr. Basilari and her team were extremely busy. They put forth 10 bills in an attempt to replicate the TRC model across California. And in 2013, SB 71 was passed, and this announced that the California Victim Compensation Board would administer and award grants to develop TRCs in California. And then in 2014, the official replication began with a lot of locations down in Los Angeles that are still TRCs, which is super exciting. And I also just want to say, I want to kind of highlight, I know it's easy to poke bureaucracies, but Cal VCB has also been really supportive of TRCs. We worked really closely with them during the pilot project, and it was because of them that we were really able to identify, gaps in existing, resources that were available to survivors. So I do want to highlight that, and they continue, of course, to be extremely intimately involved in our replication and supporting TRCs across California. In 2019, Dr. Basilari and her team created the National Alliance of TRCs. And their goal is to provide technical assistance. So they help nationwide folks that are interested in opening TRCs. They help them to identify funding streams, how to get access. So here in California, our funding for TRCs come from Prop 47 monies as well as restitution funds. Prop 47, of course, is a California-specific funding source. I think other, states, their money out just, everybody's money works a little bit different. So they help these other states to, learn where the money lives, how to access the funds, how to advocate that those funds be utilized to open a trauma recovery center. It's a wealth, of knowledge and expertise with the NATRC. So we do a lot of resource sharing and data cross-referencing and analysis. Their mission is to advocate and increase access to trauma-informed quality care for all people impacted by violence and system inequities, with a vision of a world where every survivor of violence gets the help they need to heal. And so to answer your question, we are now 44 TRCs large across the country. We're in 10 states. There's 18 of us in California. Here in California, for example, our grant cycles are every 2 years, but we're staggered. So every year, in theory, new TRCs could pop up over California. During this, well, actually after the larger funding cycle, they released an RFP for Northern California and Southern California, to extend TRC services to really remote areas of California. So again, I think, just wanting to highlight, VCB's support of the TRCs and really helping, to get TRCs, out into much needed areas. But yeah, you can see on this map where we are. I feel like every day there's different states and cities reaching out to the TA team, expressing interest. We do a lot of site visits. So it's really exciting, to see the model grow. And, I also just neglected to mention at first that the goal, of creating this model, evaluating this model, was never that it would just live here in San Francisco, but really the vision that this would be a model of care that would expand access to services all over, to survivors all over. So we're really excited. We even at one point, Australia was reaching out, so we could be taking our show on the international road. So it's just super, super exciting. And so I'll stop rambling and follow my structure that I put together. So, our model of care here in California, has been codified into legislation via AB 1384, and I think it's a fun what I'm looking for. Can't think of it, but the founder is Alicia Basileri, so it's kind of neat that they're ABs. Anyway, so we do have our. Oh,
sorry, there's a question.
Yeah.
Can you provide the TRC locations in California specifically? Is that on your website?
It's not. We have an NATRC website, so I imagine that they all live there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What's also on our website is our manual. You can download it for free. So if you, want a little reading pleasure with your morning cup of joe, you can start perusing our manual in more detail. So what we're going to do right now is go through each of the core components that are required to be considered a TRC, and then here in California to apply for and receive the TRC grant through CalVCB. So one of our components is assertive outreach and engagement with underserved populations. Give me a second. So what this component really attempts to address is that, avoidance is a huge component of a trauma reaction. A lot of our survivors are houseless. A lot of our survivors are, experience food scarcity. So their life isn't necessarily predictable and structured or scheduled. And so them, kind of walking into a brick and mortar, for example, isn't, on at the same day of the week at the same time isn't something that's always accessible to them. And so part of our model of care is really getting out into the community. If a client doesn't show for an appointment, we don't just say, oh, cool, we'll see if they show up next week. We first off consent the client for us to outreach. So we ask explicit permission if we can call them, if we can identify as the TRC, if we can leave a voicemail. The reason we do that is we don't want to place them at increased risk. Some of our clients are in active IPV situations. So we, again, don't want to do anything that would put them in harm's way. So sometimes we might have clients who are like, yeah, when you call, just say you're Dr. Smith calling from the podiatrist's office, and so whatever it is that they need us to do to make contact, we'll do that. We ask for permission to do home visits. So one of our outreach efforts, if phone doesn't work, if email doesn't work, if letters don't work, we will go to their home. Again, if we have their permission or, where they say they're staying at, we will look for them, and we'll have a letter on the ready, to leave if we aren't able to make contact with them. So we serve survivors of all types of violent crimes. So this kind of goes back to, during that field research, kind of learning where there's already pots of money, being targeted, for specific crime types, that we wanted to ensure that, we will serve, we're not limited by crime type. So, that's anybody that's experienced interpersonal violence or, again, derivative victims of homicide. And you can see here, just to really highlight that it's in the legislation. Human trafficking, is of course, one of the crime types that we will support.
We've got a question. Does the Trauma Recovery Center have a pipeline to help homeless victims, especially those who are in danger of additional violence, get placed in temporary or transitional housing?
That's a wonderful question. So just October, just this past October, all TRCs received $120,000 in emergency funds. And so honestly, for the first time, at least for us here at UCSF, we have immediate access to housing. So we can put folks up in, and it's temporary, admittedly, but we can put folks up in safe housing, especially if they're in imminent danger. But I will just say, in other TRCs, please feel free to share your experience. Here in San Francisco, we're up against the same housing challenges that, pretty much any organization is. So when the shelters are full, we don't have kind of an extra secret pathway to getting beds. So another element of the TRC model is providing comprehensive mental health and support services. So we want to offer evidence-based, evidence-informed mental health services and support services. This includes, as I said, individual, group, med management, substance use treatment, case management, assertive outreach, all in one place. And the care shall be provided in a manner that increases access to services and removes barriers. So that's a very big piece, and we'll kind of see that, show up in other components. But again, we will go to clients' homes. For some of our clients, perhaps the crime occurred really close to TRC. They don't feel safe coming here, or there's other reasons why maybe this isn't the safest location for them to be. So we will work with clients to find an environment that's safe for both the client and the clinician, that offers, sufficient confidentiality to do the treatment. We, now we have Zoom, so we can, do virtual services, although that sometimes, can just add, some tricky components to have to navigate, but our clinicians are really well versed in that at this point, so. And that also that the treatment team is multidisciplinary. So the staff needs to include at least one psychologist, one social worker, as well as additional staff. Clinicians aren't required to work full time, but the goal of this is to really have diversification in training background as well. Again, just to really bring, different, literal schools of thought to the table, to really ensure that we're providing the highest quality of care to survivors. Each clinic needs at least one psychiatrist to be available to assist with med management, provide consultation, and assist with treatment. The psychiatrist can be on staff or they can be on contract. This, unfortunately, can be easier said than done. Psychiatrists, it can be really difficult to find, especially psychiatrists that want to work with this community, more so in like the rural parts of California. I mean, it's just a mental health desert, not having clinicians, nevertheless a psychiatrist. So this has proven to sometimes be a little bit tricky. The clinician shall be licensed or supervised, working towards licensure. So again, we really, we want, licensed providers, supporting clients. And then I highlighted this part. Clinical supervision and other supports are provided to staff regularly to ensure highest quality of care to help constructively manage the VT they experience. So that's vicarious trauma. So I love that this was written into the legislation. For folks, regardless what your role is, I think that the DA's question highlights this perfectly. If you are working with trauma survivors, you are exposed to trauma, you are going to experience vicarious trauma. There's no way around it. And so this model builds in that support for the team, which is just imperative. I think otherwise, if those supports are not built in, there's just some really kind of insidious dynamics that can happen on treatment teams. If it's not specifically named and addressed and mediated, and then unfortunately the client really starts to pay the price. And so we work really hard here, with our TRC model to support the clinician. So for example, here at UCSF, even if you are a licensed clinician, you are supervised. You get individual supervision every week. We have a weekly 90-minute meeting where all new intakes are presented, and the other, it's broken into 45 minutes, 45 minutes. The second half of the meeting is case consultation. We have an hour a week of professional development time where we have, experts. We're super fortunate, being part of the UCSF system, having, people come give presentations, on topics of interest for the clinicians. We have an hour a week, what we call collective care time, where we have an outside facilitator come in and just, hold space for the clinicians and doing kind of guided visualizations and meditations and just help the clinicians learn how the work is showing up for them. And then we also have a monthly space where we do our anti-racism work as well. Of course, that work gets folded, into every space, but we have dedicated also outside folks coming in to support us with that work. So again, every TRC might do this piece differently. That's how we do it here. And it's kind of a living. They're all living spaces, right? So if it's no longer meeting the needs of the team, we reassess what needs the team has and, kind of course correct from there. And then clinician, oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, finish please, and I'll ask the question.
Oh, I was just going to say that, and then another component is that clinicians shall meet the training or certification requirements to use the evidence-based practices. And so, our multidisciplinary teams for all TRCs are just that. There's so many different perspectives and lived experiences that are brought to the table on the team. And so, we just want to ensure that folks providing the therapy, are well trained, in using the treatments that they're offering.
Okay, the first question is, well, I'll answer the first part. Yes, you'll have contact information at the end of Sarah's presentation. And then it says, can you provide services for clients who want to relocate from San Francisco to a different county?
That is a great question. Unfortunately, we are limited to San Francisco for a number of reasons. Um, the California VCB isn't our only funding source, and so we do have obligations as part of the San Francisco Department of Public Health to provide services to San Francisco residents. Also, providing the level of assertive outreach and community-based work that we provide, it's really difficult to do that cross-county. Again, we're kind of constantly balancing time and resources to really treat the most possible survivors that we can. And if, we're having to cross a bridge, to assist a survivor, that just takes a lot of time, unfortunately, out of clinicians' days. And also just from a risk management perspective, it's the further clients are, it does make it a little bit difficult. So for us in San Francisco, I know, again, this might not be true for all other TRCs, but we are limited to San Francisco residents.
Okay. And one other question, can you provide an example of different ways a clinical social worker and a psychologist will intervene with a survivor?
So, I don't know if there's a question of, if part of this question is there discipline-specific ways that folks intervene with clients? The answer to that is no. Regardless if you're a psychologist on our team here or a clinical social worker or a marriage and family therapist, you all receive the same in-house training. You're all the case manager as well as the therapist. Everybody's responding to the emergency department for acute sexual assault survivors. So no, there's no difference. And in terms of the interventions, as we spoke about earlier, doing a lot of skill building, so things like grounding, breathing exercises, we call it emotion surfing. There's all different interventions that we use with a goal, initially to really help a survivor regulate their nervous system. One of the biggest things that's immediately impacted for survivors is it's very hard for them to calm their nervous system. That affects sleep, that affects concentration, that affects mood. And so we work really hard to, as Dr. Castro Rodriguez was saying earlier, to give agency back to the client, and that includes agency over what's happening in their body. So we work with them a lot and provide a lot of psychoeducation on the impact of trauma on their nervous system, and we really help them to kind of get back in the driver's seat of being able to kind of get the parasympathetic nervous system back on board.
One more question. Do you assist in the event the victim is concerned about testifying, or is your role limited to clinical treatment only?
No, absolutely. So part of what we will offer is court accompaniment. We have a very good relationship, with our victim services office here, with the victim advocates there. So we will coordinate with them, in terms of how best to support the client. Oftentimes, what brings clients back to us after a few years, let's say, is that their case is getting ready to go to court, and that they're just feeling re-traumatized, their symptoms are resurfacing. So we absolutely support survivors through trials. Okay, and then having a coordinated care tailored to individual needs. So yes, we are a treatment model. Yes, we have a 16-week kind of frame, but we are not a cookie cutter approach. So every client's treatment plan is individualized. It is coordinated through a single point of contact. Again, the reason being, you don't want the survivor having to work with 5 different people, in your clinic. That's just overwhelming. It's hard to track. It's confusing. So, the therapist is both the therapist, again, here at TRC, a UCSF TRC, TRCs apply this differently in their locations. Here at UCSF, the therapist is both a therapist and the clinical case manager. So they're doing it all. They have the treatment plan. The treatment plan is reviewed. So some examples of treatment goals is, helping to reduce maybe the need for long-term disability, reducing risk of re-victimization is always there. Okay, and then, we've been talking a bit about clinical case management. So again, we're a jack of all trades. I think when it comes to case management, we really do what the client needs. We'll accompany them to all kinds of appointments. We help connect them with primary care. We help connect them with Healthy San Francisco, with Medi-Cal. We assist with U-Visa applications. Part of our Survivors International program is we help with psychological asylum evaluations. We help them, make police reports if that's of interest. We can even coordinate to have police officers come here to take the report at the TRC versus going to the station. So we really do it all. That being said, we are a short-term treatment model, and so we don't want to set clients up for kind of unrealistic expectations. So if housing is a need, chances are we're not going to be able to get them in permanent housing in 16 weeks, but we outline really clearly, what we can do to help them, make steps towards that longer-term goal. So inclusive treatment of clients with complex problems. So essentially, we don't want to turn clients away because they're traumatized. Clients who experience trauma, and just for example, UCSF TRC clients, on average, have 4 prior traumatic experiences before the referring crime that brings them through the door. So when somebody has a complex history of trauma like that, they tend to struggle, with emotion regulation, with relationships, and that can show up all kinds of ways, right? They're coping with binging and purging or restricting of food. They're coping with substances. They become really irritable very quickly. There's just a lot of very normal reactions that people present with, and we don't want that to be a reason why they're not accepted into care. So again, the use of trauma-informed evidence-based practices, again, kind of leaning towards wanting underserved communities to get access to high-quality care. All right. So just to give you a little peek into our data and outcomes here. So since 2001, we have fielded 21,698 referrals. So you can just kind of get a sense. This is data also since 2001 of the different crime types that we serve. And the non-crime trauma that you see, those are our NTOP clients, the neurotrauma outreach clients that experience a head injury, not in the context of a crime. And then our torture survivors are for our Survivors International program. And then, of course, we are kind of bent towards sexual assault because we also house the Rape Treatment Center. And just a little snapshot of our demographics. Right now our 18 to 25, is our smallest group, but I will just say anecdotally over the years, we've been seeing, I think, a lot more leaning even towards the 18 side of things, with college kids coming in after experiencing drug-facilitated sexual assault. So I'd be curious if, in 5 or 10 years when we have enough data, if we start seeing those bars shift a bit. So these are our treatment outcomes. So in addition to doing that really comprehensive diagnostic evaluation at the beginning, which because of course, clients don't necessarily just have PTSD, for example, right? They might have depression, they might have generalized anxiety, they might have OCD. And so we want an opportunity as we have this person in our care to do as much whole person treatment as we can. So in addition to that really comprehensive assessment at the beginning, every 8 weeks, we're doing what we call interval measures, where we're reassessing their symptomatology. Is what we're doing helping? Are we on track? what areas do we maybe need to increase, interventions around, what areas are improving, and so we can kind of shift, to the next level of need. And so we use the PCL5, which is the PTSD checklist. It's a screening tool for post-traumatic stress disorder. That blue dotted line that you see, that is the cutoff for a probable diagnosis of PTSD. You can see that our TRC clients are well above that cutoff at intake, and in just 16 sessions, their symptoms decreased by 44%, which they become below the cutoff.
There's a
And then
quick
for depression,
question. Sorry, there's
yeah.
a quick question. In your statistics, would human trafficking show up in the IPV or other category?
That is a very good question, and I honestly don't know that I could answer that without looking at specific referrals, because there might be crossover.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
People might fall in more than one category also.
Yeah. And for depression, we use the PHQ-9, which again is a screening tool for depression. That 9.5, that red dotted line this time, that is the cutoff for a probable diagnosis of depression. And again, you can see our clients are coming in at well above that cutoff. And in just 16 sessions, their symptoms are decreasing by 45%. And then this is just a snapshot of the website for the NATRC. This is our overall division website. As promised, my contact information. And that is that. So let me stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I just want to give a moment to see if there are any other questions. Lots of comments, great presentation. Thank you. This is excellent. Thanks. Let me share now. You're going to get a commercial for 2 upcoming trainings that are going to happen. So give me just a moment. All right. So this training was part of our our Survivor Center training series. We do a training every other month on the first Monday. So today was the trauma recovery and survivors training. In June, we'll be doing one on helping elder abuse survivors. So please, if you haven't already signed up, please sign up for that. If you were signed up for today, you are signed up for it already. It's the same link and information. And then we have a special training coming up. So we're going to do a trauma training certificate. The Prosecutors Alliance has developed a comprehensive 40-hour curriculum. It's going to be provided online. You can see the dates here. We begin April 20th, and we work every Thursday and Friday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Zoom. And the course is 6 hours a week online. And then there are 2 hours a week of outside of class assignments. So some reading or activities that help you to integrate the information that we're going to talk about. The curriculum is comprehensive. We're going to go over everything from what is trauma to how does trauma impact individuals and communities, crime victims and survivors, how it affects them in particular. We're going to talk about trauma responsive skills application, how to take the information and apply it to the work that you're doing around victim advocacy or working with crime survivors. And then finally, we're going to talk about healing, recovery, and resilience, both for survivors and for those of us that are working in this field. So this is a very comprehensive training that we're setting up. We would love for you to join us. We have a early bird registration rate right now until this Friday, April 6th. We're offering $400 for the entire series. After Friday, it does go up to $500. So please, if you're interested, you're going to get this presentation in the next couple of days, but you should also be receiving an email shortly with this information, or you can go to bit.ly /trauma responsive advocate, and you'll get more information about the training as well as the ability to register for the training. So please, if you're interested, this is going to be a great opportunity for a cohort of people to go through an extended training and learn a lot about trauma, what it is, how does it affect people, and what do we do about it. All right, that's the end of my commercial. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I appreciate you coming to learn. I want to thank Dr. Metz so much for taking time to share the Trauma Recovery Center model and work with us today, and for all that you do for the community. And for others of you that are here from Trauma Recovery Centers, thank you so much for the work that you also do. And to all our victim advocates out there, thank you for your hard work every day working with survivors of crime. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you in 2 months for the training on working with survivors of elder abuse.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.